Have you ever noticed how polarizing people are so persuasive over their audience? Today we're going to talk about why that's the case and how you can use that fact to make your advertising efforts more effective. I'm Nathan Frazier. This is the FMS Mastermind Podcast, and today you're going to learn one of the most powerful persuasion lessons that you'll ever come across. But as always, you might not like the implications once you truly understand what's at play here. All right, so to start off this week's episode, I'm going to tell you a story from my childhood that involves my dad. And my dad was in and out of prison a lot when we were kids. And he was part of what was called La M, the Mexican Mafia. And one day we were talking about the gangs in prison, the gangs in the neighborhood that we grew up in. I grew up in LA, and the neighborhood that we lived in, it was predominantly Black and Hispanic people that lived there. And I was pretty much the only white kid. Me and my mom were the white people in the neighborhood, and everybody else that lived there was Hispanic and Mexican and Black. And there was a lot of beef between the Mexican part of the neighborhood and the Black part of the neighborhood. And one time I was asking my dad about it, and we were talking about gang violence because there was a lot of gang violence in the neighborhood that I grew up in. And we were talking about why the gang violence was also inside of the prisons, because my dad was in a prison gang, and we were just discussing why the gang violence persisted out on the streets and why they couldn't stop the gang violence in the prisons. I always thought it was weird that you go to prison and you're supposed to be being rehabilitated and made ready for reintroduction into society, and yet the entire time you're in there, you're in this violent gang culture. And my dad explained it to me like this. He said that they actually wanted the gangs in the prisons. They didn't want to get rid of the gangs in the prisons. And he told me that a lot of the higher ups in the gang that he was in, and in the other gangs as well, the higher ups would have certain privileges that the other prisoners wouldn't have. They would be able to get drugs in. They would sometimes be able to get prostitutes in, they would be able to get weapons in, and there was a large drug trade that went on inside of the prison, and it was the guards and the wardens of the prisons kind of turned a blind eye to it as long as the gang leaders did their job. And what their job was to make sure that when anybody came into the prison, immediately they were initiated and recruited into their particular racial-based gang. And there was some division. My dad was in a prison in South California, so they were predominantly ran by the Sureño 13 gang. Up in the northern penitentiary, there was the Norteños. But the job of he was part of the Mexican Mafia. The job of what he was supposed to do was, as soon as a Mexican came into prison, he was supposed to approach them, be friendly with them, and bring them into the Mexican gang. And the other gangs were supposed to do the same thing. And as long as the gangs divided people immediately once they came in. As soon as a white person came in, they were brought into the white power gang. As soon as a Black person came in, they were brought into the Black power gang. As soon as a Mexican was brought in, they were brought into La M, or whichever Norteño or Sureño, whichever one was controlling that particular prison. And the reason that the OGs of the gangs were allowed special privileges is because it was their job to keep all of the incoming prisoners divided into these different gangs. And the reason why was because obviously there's 30 prison guards and there's 300 prisoners. And if those prisoners all united and saw themselves all as one oppressed group, they'd quickly overthrow the prison guards. But as long as they were constantly at war with each other, as long as the Mexicans were at war with the Black people, and the Black people were at war with the white people, and the white people were at war with the Muslims, as long as everybody was divided and fighting amongst themselves, as long as the prison was broken up into these little miniature groups, they would never unite and overthrow the prison. So the gangs were allowed to persist because the polarization of the prisoners served the people who were running the prison. To keep the prisoners polarized and seeing each other as others and fighting against each other, it stopped them from being able to unite and fight against the wardens and the prison guards. And if you look at the United States right now, we're kind of a macrocosm of that exact same political philosophy. We have so much division, so much polarization. We've got the left versus the right. We've got pro-life versus pro-choice. We've got the same racial division. We've got Black power movements and white power movements and Hispanic, Latinx power movements. And we've got all this division going on right now, women's rights and men's rights and all these things keeping us all divided, keeping the United States completely polarized, all these different identity groups fighting against each other so that we never unite and fight against the tax eaters who run everything at the very top. The tax farm that is the United States, the tax cattle that is all of us, is run very similarly to how the prison was ran when my father was explaining to me why the gangs were allowed to persist in the prisons in California. And growing up as a white kid in a Mexican family in a predominantly black neighborhood, with a Native American grandfather, I kind of got a bunch of different influences hitting me from all different sides. So I never really had a racial identity. If I was going to say I identified as anything racially, it would probably be, or at least culturally, it would probably be Hispanic, but obviously I'm not Hispanic. But that was what I was raised up in the Hispanic culture. But coming from my perspective, it was really easy to not be sucked into any of these racial identities because I didn't really fit any of them. And so I saw them from an outside. I was never really polarized to any one of these particular racial identities. And the same thing with political philosophy. There's a lot of stuff that I agree with the left on. There's a lot of stuff that I agree with the right on. When it comes to my economic policies, I'm a business owner. I'm a very successful business owner. I make a lot of money. So the left wing kind of terrifies me with their pro-communist, pro-equity views about money. On the other hand, I am a practitioner of magic, and some of my religious beliefs and my magical philosophy makes me a huge outsider to the Christian conservatives. And I grew up in the 80s. I remember the Satanic Panic. So I'm kind of terrified of the extremes on the right wing as well. The extremists on the left wing, I definitely don't get along with, and I am pretty scared of what might happen if they ever gain control of the country. Also, the extremists on the right wing, I'm a little bit afraid of what might happen if they gain control of the country. I don't really like polarized extremes. I see a huge danger when people allow themselves to become too polarized. Both societal-wise and in my own personal life, I try to avoid becoming polarized myself because there's a lot of problems that arise once a group of people or you as an individual allow yourself to be polarized to one extreme or the other. In the Kabbalah, the tree of life, they have 3 pillars. They have 1 pillar on the left, they have 1 pillar on the right, and then they have the middle pillar. The pillar on the left-hand path, is very strict and stern. It's about tradition. It's about punishment. It's about making sure that you serve your due and that you are punished and rewarded for your actions. And then the pillar on the right is supposed to represent the more forgiving, the more caring, the more nurturing. And with my limited understanding of the practice of Hermetic esotericism, a lot of times people pick, am I going to be a left-hand magician, the left-hand path, or am I going to be a right-hand magician, the right-hand path? Am I going to be about control and power, or am I going to be about forgiving and being a light worker? And to me, both extremes seem a little bit absurd, and I think that there's value in both as well. I think that to say I'm only going to go down the left-hand path or I'm only going to go down the right-hand path, I think that there's value in both. And much like my political philosophy, much like my racial identity, I think that there's a lot of power in staying balanced, in being able to say, hey, I'm not going to be polarized to the extreme left or to the extreme right. And when you start looking into things like the Golden Dawn, or you start looking into some of the Hermetic practices, the Kabbalion, or some of the other Western Hermeticism teachings, there's something called the middle path or the middle pillar. And there's a meditation that is supposed to help you become grounded and not be polarized to the left or to the right. And whether you think that stuff is just woo and just kind of crazy, kooky stuff, doesn't matter. The philosophy is sound. Making sure that you stay grounded, making sure that you stay balanced, making sure that you don't allow yourself to be polarized to the extreme left or the extreme right of any issue gives you a lot of strength and makes you a lot less susceptible to manipulation. And the reason why is the more polarized you become, the more emotionally charged you become. And the more emotionally charged you are, the more likely you are to act impulsively when somebody sets off a spark. And in marketing, our job is to ignite that spark, is to emotionally charge people, get people polarized, and then ignite that spark. And hopefully the impulsive action they take is a buying decision. And we'll flesh that out a little bit more in one moment. But first, let's look a little bit more at what causes this polarization. And I think the best term that I can use to describe it is tribalism. We get locked in these different tribes. I'm a Democrat. I'm a Republican. I'm an anarchist. I'm a black person. I'm a white person. I'm a cis person. I'm a trans person. I'm non-binary, queer, disabled, whatever the case may be. I'm part of this tribe. And so when I'm unsure about how I should feel about any particular issue, I look to the tribe. How does the tribe vote on this issue? What is the tribe's opinion on this issue? What does the tribe say? And I want to make sure that I'm in line with the tribe, because if I go against the grain, the tribe might kick me out. And I've put so much of my identity, so much of who I am is invested in being part of this tribe. I want to make sure that I conform with that tribe. Otherwise, I might be out on my own. And that's a scary place to be. And so groupthink, thinking of yourself as part of a group rather than as an individual, makes you so easy to manipulate. As a social engineer, as an influencer, as a tribal leader, all I have to do is position myself as the mouthpiece, the spokesperson of the group, or buy up a couple of the mouthpieces, make sure that the spokespersons for the group are on my payroll, make myself one of the most polarizing people in the group, or put the most polarizing people in the group on my payroll. And then my opinions, or the opinions I pay the most vocal mouthpieces to promote, become the opinions of the group. So as long as I can keep people polarized, as long as I can keep people identifying as part of the group, all I have to do is control one or two of the influencers at the top, and I control the entire group. And that includes how that group votes, what that group gets outraged about, and the products and services that that group consumes. And that's why it's so important in marketing to understand the villains and the virtues of your target market, so that you can line up next to your target market and you can throw stones at those villains, and you can blame all the problems of the world on those villains, and you can mimic the virtues of your target market so that they see you as one of them. We talked last week about the ability to pace and lead, to match, to harmonize, and then to pull them in the direction that you want them to go. While polarizing, pointing out the villains and embodying the virtues of your target market, has a lot to do with the ability to pace and lead. But here's the point. All of this polarization, all of this becoming emotionally charged, all of this looking to the tribe to figure out how I'm supposed to vote, or what I'm supposed to be angry about, or what it is that I'm supposed to buy, which kind of clothes I'm supposed to wear, which kind of car I'm supposed to drive. All of that is for the sleepwalkers. All of that is for the consumers. All of that is for the people who don't want to live a balanced life. And that's the majority of the people out there. The majority of the people out there want to be taken on an emotional roller coaster. They want to be polarized. They want to be emotionally enraged and pointed in a direction and be told how to let that emotion go. That's what they want. That's where their mind is at. And if you want to sell to them, you have to meet them where they are. You have to sell to them the way they are. And like most things when it comes to marketing, I'm not really happy with the fact that this is the way that people are, but it is the way that people are. But that doesn't mean it's the way that I have to be. And that doesn't mean that it's the way that you have to be. Your job as a marketer or as a business owner is to understand the nature of the rest of humanity, the sleepwalkers, the consumers, the people out there buying your product or service. Your job is to understand what makes them tick, but not become a victim of it yourself. Because the better you are at finding balance in your own life, at being able to avoid being polarized, the better you'll be able to control your own circumstances and your own outcomes. The better you are at avoiding becoming polarized yourself, the better you will be defended against being manipulated. So the point is, if you want to be influential, if you want to be persuasive, if you want to be manipulative, and you don't have to be manipulative to get sales. In fact, I advise against it. But if you want to be manipulative, you have to be polarizing and avoid becoming polarized yourself. So again, the masses want to be polarized. They want to be broken up into different groups. They want to identify with their group, and they want the mouthpieces, the most vocal people in the group, the most polarizing people in the group. They want to be told what to do by those people. So as a marketer, as a business owner, as a brand, it's your job to become the polarizing figure that tells the group what it is that they're supposed to do, what it is that they're supposed to buy. But in your own life, practice being balanced. Practice not being pulled to either extreme. Practice not becoming polarized so that you have more control over yourself, your surroundings, and your business. Being polarized gives other people influence over your decision making. Being polarizing gives you influence over other people's decision making. Now, if you want to learn more about what makes people tick and how you can use that knowledge to make more money for yourself, your business, and your clients, you should probably check out the FMS Mastermind. It's my private marketing mastermind, and if today's lesson didn't scare you off, you'll probably get a kick out of the stuff that I have for you over there. And this weekend only, you can get a lifetime membership for 50% off the normal price. That's January 14th, 15th, and 16th, all the way up to the full moon for esoteric reasons. You can get half off a lifetime membership to the FMS Mastermind. If you want to find out more, go to forbiddenmarketingsecrets.com and I'll see you there. My name's Nathan Frazier, internet marketer with face tattoos. This is the FMS Mastermind podcast, and I'm out of here. Deuces. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you're subscribed so you always catch the content we create for you in the future.